When you're sad, you don't act like yourself. You gotta think of everything while you're writing it. Gotta keep the right punctuation. Gotta make sure capital letters. Gotta use phonics. Difficult. I've written to 200 people. I'm trying to communicate with them so they can pass my letter on to the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. If we don't have communication, then we can't share our ideas. When everybody comes together, they share their ideas and make it fun and happy.
My name's Nicky Gale and I'm one of the project leads for Priority Literacy, working on the Book Sparks project. And I'm joined today by colleagues from Warren Academy here in Nottingham, Kellie Salam, who is the head of school, and Fern Pithers, who is the assistant head teacher. And the aim of this podcast is really to spend a bit of time exploring how to foster a culture of reading for pleasure. We've done a lot of work during Priority Literacy on this, and we hope today that we provide you with some advice and some tips about how to do this really successfully in your school, but also to help you understand the impact that it can have on your young people. When it comes to the topic of reading for pleasure, we often overlook how important that aspect of reading is. We give a lot of priority in schools to the mastery of skills surrounding reading, which obviously is really critical and important. But what if we think about reading for pleasure being about enhancing the joy that young people have, giving them the choice and the volition, reading what you want, how you want, and then thoroughly enjoying it. Building a reading for pleasure culture in your school can often have its challenges. And what seems to be some of the problems, despite the strong efforts of staff, is that there is a lack of collaboration. And the best, most successful schools who run reading for pleasure culture really successfully, often it's more to do with the collaboration, the inclusion of all the school community in driving that initiative forward. Some of the most successful schools in terms of reading for pleasure have a strategic and collaborative approach to what they do, including the whole school community, making sure that includes the choice of the children, supporting parents, and helping the whole school community gather round to promote reading for pleasure. One of the strands of Priority Literacy funded through the whole DFE programme has been around reading for pleasure culture, and an aspect of that has been Book Sparks, which is the project that I have led on with my colleague Hayley. And what we tried to do throughout that whole period of time was to pull on lots of different strategies that schools could incorporate and use to enhance their reading for pleasure provision. So that was reading projects and book awards, engaging with outside organisations like Book Trust, like Bookmark, like Read for Good, and the local Inspire ELS from Nottingham, to help schools navigate what they could do to enhance their own provision. We've tried to have lots of different sorts of initiatives and events that schools could get involved with, like the Readathon and like a whole range of author engagement events. But Book Sparks has been trying to give schools a bit of a toolkit of different things that they could get involved with. So looking at this from a research perspective, Teresa Kremen, who is Professor of Education at the Open University and also leads one of the country's leading experts in terms of reading, talks about how schools should try to engage with reading for pleasure in a particular way. She talks about, and I'm quoting here, that many schools are striving to showcase their commitment to fostering reading communities, but often fall into a common trap. And that common trap is that they perform reading for pleasure rather than actually engage with it and strategically have a strategic approach in terms of a whole school initiative. There's nothing wrong with lots of different events and bits and pieces going on in school, but it needs to be a whole school strategy where it becomes an everyday, normal occurrence that reading for pleasure is part of your daily schedule and your daily timetable. So how do schools avoid performing reading for pleasure and thoroughly engage in building of a genuine reading for pleasure culture? It requires a real culture shift in school and a mindset and a school approach that means that the whole school community is involved. It also requires time. Lots of studies talk about how it's the element of a school day that quite often gets squeezed out. So time for the strategy and time to plan that strategy, but on a day-to-day basis, time given over to commit to it and to enable the children to use that time to read for pleasure. Neglecting to nurture reading for pleasure can have quite far-reaching consequences. Research shows that the impact of it has real benefits in terms of building vocabulary, academic progress, but also making sure that children are building skills of empathy, making sure that they are building their vocabulary, so academic but well-being as much as anything else. And devoting time to reading for pleasure, you will see the impact that it has on all aspects of the school life. So what can be done differently or developed as a whole school approach? As part of BookSparks, what we tried to do was to make sure that there was a huge range of books going into schools. This was predominantly for secondary, but having a real wide choice of reading materials, good quality reading materials, lots of different genres, lots of different elements of reading, from comics to newspapers, lots of different things that children could actually engage with. We tried to do that as part of BookSparks. Another element was author engagement. It's shown that children who are more reluctant readers are quite often taken by meeting with an author or engaging with an author. And what we tried to do was to run a whole range of different online live reading events where we interviewed authors, and the children from the different classes in schools could engage with that remotely, but actually ask questions directly to the authors, which had a huge impact on a lot of children. We had some really great feedback from schools who took part in those reading events. The other thing we tried to encourage was the development of reading groups and book clubs in schools. Being able to share your experience of reading is really, really huge and has a huge impact on people's engagement with reading. It's a social activity. It's not something that we do in silence by ourselves. So being able to talk about books that they've read, sharing their opinions, making some real sort of judgments about things they like and they don't like is all part of those rights as a reader. So the encouragement of book clubs is something that we try to do quite considerably as part of the whole BookSparks strategy. Building a reading for pleasure culture involves cultivating a positive environment where reading is valued and celebrated. This needs to, however, be constantly and consistently woven into what happens every day in school. And you will see a huge impact that this will have on the successes in terms of academic reading, but the embracing of reading for pleasure, building of empathy, and building that school community. I know that Warren Academy are still on their reading for pleasure journey, but they're going to tell us a little bit about how they got started and what's happened so far. This will give us a bit of an insight into how to engage the whole school in coming up with the priorities for your reading for pleasure strategy, but also to make sure that they give you lots of advice about how to engage them and keep that momentum going. They'll also talk about their most successful strategies and the impact that they've seen that have on their school community.
I'm Fern Pithers, Assistant Head at Warren Academy and also the whole school English lead.
And I'm Kellie Slum, I'm the Head of School at Warren Academy. We started our Reading for Pleasure journey about 3 years ago at Warren Academy, and the way in which that started is that myself and Fern were put into post at Warren, and we were both really passionate about reading. And I'd come from a school where Reading for Pleasure was a really big thing, and coming into Warren where the context of that was not really in place really stood out. Fern came from a school where oracy was a really big thing as well. So those two things combined together was something that we were both really passionate about, and we started the journey from there really. And the first thing that we looked at was our reading community, and that included the children, the parents, what the wider community looked like, and also our environment within school. So we took all of those elements and we thought, what are we going to do about this? And we knew it wasn't going to be something that just happened overnight. It was going to be something that we'd need to think really strategically about, and we'd have to plan for. But we got the ball rolling from that point, and then Fern started to do a piece of work around what our reading community looked like.
Yeah, I think it's really important to remember that reading for pleasure is a pedagogy, not just a nice phrase, oh, we like reading, we like nice books. It's actually really important to have a really clear plan, because you can't do everything at once. So we had to decide that what our starting point would be. So we decided on focusing on our environments and our school and our spaces within school that would engage the children and excite the children to want to read.
And one of the things that we did first of all was our library. So when we first started at Warren, we'd had a lot of work done on the building, and it looked very nice and very new and very modern, but there wasn't any reading spaces at all. So the library was our first port of call, really. We had a library space, but it was made up of books that were just accelerated reader books, so book-banded books, and it didn't really promote a love of reading or had a variety of texts. We also spent time investing in text, so getting books that were donated to us through various different charities, but also from donations within the community. And so the library is now the hub of our school. It's right in the centre, and it's what everything focuses around in the middle of it all.
Yeah, we also created a bit of a checklist for our staff so that they knew sort of what needed to be in their classrooms to engage the children with reading. So making sure every classroom had a reading corner, making sure those books were simple things like forward facing. And that was a really important starting point for us. It was almost like that was the foundation that we needed for the rest of our Reading for Pleasure strategies and ideas to build from there. We also thought about how we could get that staff buy-in, because without everybody in the community being on the same page with Reading for Pleasure, that culture shift won't happen. Like I say, it's not just, oh, this is an initiative, we're doing this, it's a change in people's culture and the way we do things day in, day out. So we did a staff survey to gauge sort of subject knowledge and teachers being readers, because it's really important that teachers are role models and everyone in the community as a reading role model. So that was a really good starting point for us, yeah.
And I think from that then started to raise awareness of other people within the community. So we'd have parents wanting more books. We'd have displays around school around certain things. So when you walk into Warren now, there are book nooks, and there are areas all across the school where books are displayed, and it might just be that one child picks up one of those books and then that sparks something within them. But without having those spaces and those areas within school, we weren't able to do that. A really good example of that was that in the first year of us being on this journey is that we had some books out about Ramadan in the front office. And we've been trying to use books as a way of raising awareness around the diversity of our community. And so we have books around school for different cultures, different faiths, different religious events. And so Ramadan was happening at that time, and we had some books in our school office, and one of the parents noticed that these books were on display, and actually said to myself said to me that, can I borrow that book? I've just had a family friend who's converted to Islam, and I'd like to teach my child more about it so that they can understand what they've done and what their life is now like, because they're a part of this culture. And if we'd not had those books on display, that one parent and that family wouldn't have had the opportunity to develop that. But because we did, it's then meant that we've looked at our curriculum and filtered that in as a part of that as well. So it's been really powerful having these book areas around school just to raise the awareness of different things really, and it's been really powerful.
I remember another time as well, we had a delivery of graphic novels and we had them all out on display, and there was about 10, 15 books out, and a boy who in year 6, he was a reluctant reader, didn't really like reading, he walked past and he went, "Oh miss, I didn't know books like this existed," and about 10 minutes later the shelf was empty. So that was a nice, just them books being there and different types of books, and reminding children and teachers that reading is not just a book, a novel. There's so many different ways you can enjoy reading, listening to books, and it's a social thing. It's not just, oh, I'm sat here reading on my own. It can be a really nice experience, a way of, it supports your well-being. It's a social thing. It helps with communication. There's so many different benefits to reading for pleasure. So it's nice that children can sort of see the different books out there, but also see themselves in books as well, making sure that our community is represented. That was really important to us.
Yeah, I think something that's also important that we've kind of touched on is around the curriculum. So when Fern and I started within our roles and we were really passionate about reading, we wanted to make sure that reading featured as a part of that. And so we rewrote our school curriculum, including English texts, what the reading curriculum looked like, the history and geography curriculum, so that they were all linked to key texts. And we have those displayed around school. So if you now walk around Warren, there's displays of books outside the classroom so that when you walk in, you know what the topics are going to be that the children are learning about. But we've also got areas, like we've already touched upon, around the geography curriculum. So we've had a lot of children recently start at Warren that have moved into the area, that have moved from Zimbabwe. So we've now got a book area that's all about Africa, it's about Zimbabwe, and it allows the children to feel empowered. So there's one boy in year 6 who I gave him a book that was specifically about Zimbabwe, and his face lit up. He was so happy that something had been given to him that represented him and who he is. And I think that's been a really important culture point in terms of the culture of the communities and the families that we have, but also changing the culture within school to understand that a book can be really powerful in helping develop understanding and knowledge of different faiths and different communities.
When building reading for pleasure culture and making sure it's not just something that we're performing, it's something that is part of our day-to-day practice. As I've mentioned, it's really important that teachers and everyone in staff subject knowledge around books is as good as it can be, and that teachers are readers. So we did our staff survey to sit and sort of gauge a starting point with that, and then we made sure our colleague meetings focused around reading, or we had reading spotlights, encouraged staff to bring books to weekly briefings, for example. We also held a colleague meeting at the local library, the ELS, Inspire, and we just had an hour just to explore and get excited about books. If we ever have any new deliveries, we put them in the staff room, just so it's at the forefront of everybody's minds all the time. For my own development, I went to one of the OU TRG, teacher reader groups, where they meet sort of every term to discuss practice and share strategies and create a bit of an action plan. That was a really, really good starting point, alongside a lot of the resources on the OU website, such as the surveys and the children's surveys, where you can gain their voice as well.
And I think in order to not make it something that's just tokenistic and it's something that you get everybody on board on, is that you've got to really show how it can be manageable, because there's so many things that are going on every day in schools, and every week there is some kind of themed week or something that you've got to turn your attention to, and so it can become something that is very tokenistic. You do need to have some level of strategy to it, and it needs to feel like it's being done with and not done to. And I think that was really key for us, because we were going through such a period of change when we were introducing this. We needed it to feel like we were all in this together. And we do go through peaks and troughs, so there are times when we are doing more, but there's always a continuous thread of something to do with reading that's happening. So something we've introduced this year in order to try and help reading aloud and reading at the end of the day. That tends to be the bit where you lose reading, because at the end of the day, 3 o'clock, you're saying you've got to read a book at the end of the day, and we all know the significance and all know the importance of it, but actually 100 things could happen during the day and then you don't end up having time to do it. So we've built in then an assembly rota, which was something that I'd seen that somebody online, I think it was John Biddle, he'd suggested, where we have an assembly rota that's all linked to books. So if we are doing something that's on Science Week, we'll have a book that's read during that assembly and we all read it as a whole school. So that in the event that the class read that's at the end of the day gets missed for that day, the children have still had somebody read to them during that day, because we don't want to lose that, but we also understand that things happen and that it's sometimes really difficult to make sure you fit everything in. And so I think the underlying thing about not making this tokenistic but actually making it something that's manageable is making the staff realise that, and it's not a you've got to do this, this, this and this, but we're all doing these things together to continually promote a love of reading and make sure that we're also promoting that love of reading as well.
Building a reading for pleasure culture, you have to involve your whole community. Teachers, staff, everybody's a really important part of that, because it's a way of thinking of pedagogy rather than just, we're doing this event, we're doing bits and pieces here, including parents, including even the wider community, beyond and outside of school is really, really important. Something that we did recently was the readathon. So we got everybody involved in that, how many minutes we could read, and we launched it, really exciting assembly at the start, we celebrated at the end, and the parents got involved and families. It became a really nice community event that excited people into reading. We also have used virtual author visits to engage the children and shared those with events that are happening and things that parents and families can access at home as well is really important, because we don't want reading for pleasure to be a daunting thing for our parents, where that could be something that makes, thinking, I've got to read and do this, that can be a little bit overwhelming. So any events that we do, we really make sure they're accessible for everybody, and that, as I've mentioned, reading isn't just about reading a book, it's about sharing, about the experience and the social side of it as well.
And something we had when we first started at Warren was that parents had a real emphasis on the number of words that were read, rather than reading together as a social element, or for it to become something that might help you de-stress or just enjoy a love of reading. So we introduced a reading vending machine, and that's a part of our reading incentive now. So if the children read 50 times at home, and that can be reading whatever they want to, we have a book banded book and a reading for pleasure book that goes home. They could read either of those two things, and if they've read 50 times, our dedicated reading team will give the children a golden token, and they get to go and put that within the vending machine and get a free book that they then get to keep. And Fern's done a lot of work with a group of children every year who we call our reading team, and who are very loyal and very dedicated in promoting a love of reading, but Fern empowers them to be able to do that through doing different things.
Last year, when Key Stage 1 were performing their nativity, and we had some residents from a local care home come in, and the reading team decided that they wanted to sit and read with these residents and really share their love of reading, and they talked about getting book boxes sent over to them and stuff, so that's a really nice little
One of the
memory.
residents had said that their grandchild had really liked a particular kind of book, hadn't they? And then they went to find that book to give it as a gift to them for something to take home, which was a really powerful thing to see. Really powerful. We also have a book swap. So our book swap is completely free, and it's made up of donated books that are given to us by various different people from the community, from Facebook pages. We have a group of people now who regularly donate books to us on a regular basis, and we run that outside in the playground at home time every other week, and the children can just pick up a book that they like and they can take it home, and then they bring it back and swap it for another one. A lot of the time we don't get the books back, but we're not bothered. Well, our main thing there is that we're getting books into homes, and particularly in an area that is of quite high disadvantage. It's really important for us to know that we're giving children literature and books that they can read at home, even if it is just them reading alone, or if they're sharing it wider than that. It's really important that we do that, and we have parents and carers every week coming to that, because it's free and it's very non-threatening. It's just you can come up to the table, pick what you like, and then you can go. There isn't any other connotation to it, and that's been really successful so far.
I think that's something that I think is really important to know, that when you're inviting parents in for events, rather than it saying, reading morning, we call it book sharing, takes away that daunting element to make it even more accessible for everyone in the community.
And I think that goes hand in hand with what we've said about our curriculum. So our curriculum is very heavily based around books. But if we do something where we want the parents to come in, we'll often offer tea or coffee or breakfast. So recently for Science Week, we've done science, books and breakfast, where we have the whole of the dining room decorated with science experiments, science books that are linked to whatever the experiments are. And then we have a free breakfast offer. So that allows parents to come in and engage with the curriculum, engage with reading, but also be a part of this shared experience that we have that's linked to a topic or a theme. So in this instance, it was to do with Science Week.
The reading team were fundamental to the culture shift at Warren. That was one of the first things we set up. We had our environments, we had the teachers on board. So it was about having a group of children who would lead the way with organising events, supporting younger children with reading, and just really promoting and flying the flag for a love of reading. As Kelly mentioned, the reading team were incredibly loyal. Often asking me, Miss, what's the next event we're doing? What can I do? Can I go and sort the library out? They were very, very loyal. They enjoyed setting up recommendation boxes in the classrooms. They did a really nice thing in year 6 once where they put a box that said picture books for siblings. So the older children were taking picture books home to read with their younger siblings or family members. On World Poetry Day, last year, one of the reading team dressed up as a fairy and went around delivering poetry books, and that was just something she wanted to do because she wanted to celebrate World Poetry Day, but we had a lot of things going on at school, and we talk about things being manageable, and rather than doing a really big, massive poetry event, we thought we'll recognise it in our own way, and that was what we did. We had the poetry fairy go around and deliver these parcels. We really wanted to empower our reading team, so when we applied for the Reading for Pleasure award, they were part of helping me to write the case study, and they were fundamental to that. They shared their own stories and added their ideas and what they thought the impact of our Reading for Pleasure culture had. So when I told them that we'd won, they were very, very excited. So I wasn't allowed to tell anybody for ages, and I had to keep that a bit of a secret from them. And we also did a conference last year where the reading team came with us and presented, because children's voices in Reading for Pleasure is, the most important part.
A fundamental part of our school curriculum is that we want the children to see themselves reflected within our community. For example, last year we had a child in year 6 who was of Sikh faith, and there wasn't anything in our areas or in our environment that reflected him. And so we made sure that we had a dedicated area of our library where we put out RE artefacts that would often just sit in a drawer in a school and then display with books around it. And so he could identify with the fact that this was something that represented him, and that's something that we've continued to develop, and we have key events throughout the course of the year that have almost become a bit like annual things that we do. So we celebrate Black History Month in October every year, and we decide on a set of texts that the children are going to use for Black History Month, and we set up an art project. So the children will read a book that is linked to somebody that is significant in Black history, depending on whatever the theme is. Last year's theme was saluting our sisters. So we chose a series of texts around influential Black women, and the children had to learn about that person, and then they were given just a blank white cube, and then they had to reflect their learning from the book or on this cube, and we then exhibited it as an art exhibition. But all that stemmed from the text that the children read. So we had people like Alison Hammond, and we had a year group do Beyonce, and they just learned about these people who had been so important as a part of modern day history, but also within past history, that they got to represent and then share that learning with parents and carers. And we had some parents in the first year that we did this where they came into our exhibition and was crying, and they were saying that they'd never had something like this before, and they felt so represented within what we were doing in school, and that was a really impactful moment to see that. We also do other themed things, so we do Refugee Week every year. Last year we did we focused this around a text called The Last Garden. That was all about how flowers and gardens can still grow in places where there is a war or the land has been destroyed, and there's always something that can still grow there. And the children read that book to understand and develop their knowledge about refugees and what happens to refugees. But then we then made our own garden to represent what home means to us. And then that piece of work was represented within Nottingham Central Library, where the children could go and visit and have a look at the work that they'd created, but it all stemmed from that text that they had. We also do Careers Week, and that always focuses around a text. So we did a text last year that was called What Will I Be?, which is a very simple picture book with poetry going through it. And then we tied that in with a number of different visitors from across Nottingham coming into school to speak about their jobs, about aspirations, about hopes for the future, so that the children can really develop their understanding around what they can be when they're older, again, stemming from that text that we chose. And then that happened to fall within the same week as World Book Day. So for World Book Day, the children then dressed up what they want as what they wanted to be when they were older, and then they created their own poems to represent what their dreams and ambitions were going to be, and then we created a display of that within school.
It's really important when building a reading for pleasure culture to have a really good understanding of the children's interests and the books they want and the books they like to read. Something we do, really simple thing you can do, it's like a quick win, is we find a book that we know that a child in a particular class might like, and then we write it on a post-it note and leave it on their desk or hide it in their tray, so when they come into school the next day it's there ready for them. We had one particular child last year who found reading quite tricky, and she felt a little bit, didn't want to express how she was feeling about reading, and I found her a book that had yellow pages, and immediately she looked at it and she went, oh, that's so much easier for me to read, and left that on her desk. And then she took that home, and her mum came to tell me, oh, she keeps talking about this book, have you got any more? She seems to be really enjoying the book. So then she became part of the reading team, and that sort of got her involved in reading, and she really wanted to express how there are different books for different people, and how books with particular pages or different sizes is something to be proud of. And she ended up writing in our Warren reading newsletter about it, and that went home to the parents. So it's that communication with home and building that sort of bridge between school and home through books can be really powerful, and ensuring that parents know that reading for pleasure is something that we can all do, we can all engage with, and it can be really simple things, going to the library on a Saturday, using these organisations and services, and there's so many resources out there, and to really encourage that reading at home. Something that, again, the reading team, they're a very busy team. They created bedtime bags, so it was just a really simple tote bag, and there was books in there was puppets, there was sort of different activities and ideas that parents could use at home, and then parents took those at parents' evening if they wanted one, and we had like a signing in and out system, took them home, and then I got pictures sent to me of parents reading with their children in bed, and it was a really lovely way of providing them that support. Again, that connection between school and home, really important. Something really simple, but just empowered them a little bit to know that they had this sort of resource that they could use at home in the family, and the feedback from it was amazing.
And some other things that we've done in terms of reading at home, especially with the research that's come about recently about how much time children spend on devices and on tablets and things like that at home, is we tried to think about the way in which we can promote reading where parents might not have lots of time to be able to sit with their children and read, but they can still interact with them in some way. So our newsletter now features on a bi-weekly basis reading recommendations. So we'll often put a picture of a text that they can read, or we might do it around a theme. So for example, recently it was Online Safety Week, and we put a series of texts that the children could read at home with links or QR codes, so that they could then access those independently if they wanted to, so that if they are using devices at home, they can be reading on those devices rather than using it for gaming. So we've tried to think about how we can try and bridge this gap. We know it's not ideal that children are reading off a screen continuously these days, but if they're going to be doing that and it's supporting parents in encouraging reading, then how can we make that more purposeful for them, so that they are looking at that from a reading lens rather than just I'm sitting on it and playing this game. We sometimes do Mrs. Salam's reading recommendations, and I will put links in, and we might say what the book theme has been for assembly for that week, and we can share it at home, and that type of thing. So we have started incorporating things that we can do online but are more purposeful to make that time spent on a device purposeful for their education, really.
We've also had teachers reading and staff from across school recording themselves reading a book, and we posted that on the communication platform that we use with our parents, so they could just watch it, or the children could just sit and watch somebody at school, somebody they know, again, being a role model as a reader, but it's accessible and they can just watch it and listen to the story from someone at school, and that excitement waiting each day to find out who it might be really engage the children and the families.
That's been really powerful because we've stopped it at a certain point. So it's been one teacher's read so many pages, and then they've gone, oh, you're going to have to come back to have the next instalment tomorrow, and then they won't know who it is. And so every day the anticipation of which teacher's going to be reading that story on the platform has been really interesting to see. But it's also promoted parents speaking about reading. So we now have parents coming up to us on the gate saying, I can't wait to have the next instalment of this, or my child read this at home last night. Could you tell us another book that they could read that's similar to this? So I think that level of informalness about things has allowed parents to become more engaged with it. It doesn't feel like this thing that's very threatening, whereas reading can be perceived in that way, especially if parents struggle with reading themselves. And we do have some parents in our community that are open about that, and so they aren't able to read at home. So we've tried to give them ways in which they can engage with reading, which doesn't then make them also feel intimidated by it as well. So I guess the things that we've learned from our journey is that there are some things that you can do as quick wins, but there's also things that you need to do that are going to take time. So something that we've done right from the very beginning is make sure that reading runs through everything that we do. It's not something that's going to happen with just one person. You need to make sure that everybody's on board with it in your school, but also making sure that people don't feel like it's a thing that's being done to. People need to buy into what you're doing, and it doesn't need to feel like it's just another thing that's being done in your school. They need to understand the significance and the importance of it. I think one of the key pieces of research is that reading is the single most important factor in a child's success. That's been our driver, and that's been the thing that has underpinned all of this reading for pleasure work that we have done. So there needs to be buy-in from senior leadership teams. They need to understand the importance of it, because it's not just something that one person can achieve in a school on their own. It needs to be everybody's involved in it, and they understand the importance and the reasons why it's so important.
I also think another really important top tip is to include parents, making it accessible, making reading events and things in school accessible and not daunting, that they're not, you have to come in and read. Things that are inviting, books and breakfast, nice, relaxed sort of events to introduce books to families, provide them with things that they can do at home that's not going to, because we know how busy everybody is and everyone leads busy lives, things that aren't going to take lots of time, things that are easy for them just to pick up and enjoy. And that's why it's important, enjoying reading. Something that's going to have a really positive effect on your family and your children, and something that you can enjoy together.
With reading for pleasure, if one child can pick up a book and then that allows them to pick up another book and another book and another book, and then they find what they love and what they like, that is really a success from it all. So it could be one child, it could be a group of children, it could be the whole school. It's all about knowing that what you're doing, it could have the impact on a few, and that is then going to allow them to have successful futures.
So the impact of our reading for pleasure culture shift has been clear to see in terms of our staff at school. We talked about how important community is, and knowing that it's something that we can all get involved with. The teachers' confidence around books and what reading for pleasure means has definitely grown, but also where, you know, staff still might be unsure about something, or they want a recommendation or a bit of advice, they know that we can come and talk about it with each other, and then we've got like an open door policy that we can share reading for pleasure practice with one another, and it's okay to ask questions about it because, you know, we're all still learning. But
I think the impact that we've also seen as well is that if staff don't know what book to choose, or they haven't got a recommendation, is that they can come and ask. So allowing them to know that they can be vulnerable and not having every author of every child's book available in their head, that they can have conversations and collaborate with one another to go, I know this child that really likes reading about football. Have you got any recommendations for this child that I could give to them that they could go away and we could have a look at, or we could buy into? We recently had a rap workshop as a part of World Book Day. And the children, we've discovered, absolutely love rapping. So we've now bought a series of books all to do with rap so that the children can engage with those. So it's about being vulnerable in that not everybody's able to know everything about reading, but there are so many authors and different books out there that we can look into it together, or someone might know something that we've not heard about before. And so giving staff the space to be able to feel like they can come and talk to you or members of the team about reading about books is also really key, and something that we've had seen impact with.
I think for me as well, something that's a really good indicator of success in terms of our reading for pleasure culture, it might seem like a really small thing, but the amount of just people, children, parents, just talking about books, those informal book discussions, that book talk that goes on. I might be walking down the corridor and the child goes, oh, Miss Pithers, I'm reading this book, or have you seen this? Or just those little moments where you can feel people's sort of positive attitude towards reading, parents coming to talk to you in the morning about how they enjoyed reading at home with their child last night. It's just those little moments, I think, for me, that show how important reading for pleasure is. And it might seem like small moments, but actually that's just a shift in the culture, because everybody wants to talk about reading and books and their experiences. So I think that's a really important takeaway, that it can be something, it seems small, but actually, you know, it's a big win, really.
As we come to the end of this podcast, we'd like to share with you a few top priority tips and bits of advice that we can to help you either start your journey in terms of reading for pleasure, or press the reset button if you want to relaunch it in your school. From me, I would talk about engaging with as many reading organisations, reading charities and opportunities that you can to engage with events, but also to tap into some great resources that are produced by these organisations. Obviously, the NLT, who we've been working with as part of Priority Literacy, is probably at the top of the list in terms of what they can offer you. But I would talk about lots and lots of different charities. Read for Good, if you want to run your own readathon that mirrors the readathon that we ran this year. Bookmark, who are a voluntary reading charity who give lots and lots of really great advice and support and resources to schools, but use and look locally. So Inspire, who are the educational learning service, library service in Nottingham, are a great resource, and it's just on your doorstep, and it can be used in both Nottingham and Derby. I would also talk about engaging with lots of other wider organisations like Book Trust, like the Reading Agency, getting involved with the Summer Reading Challenge, lots of things that you probably are already thinking about or are already part of your agenda, but ensuring there's a consistent approach to these things and looking out for other opportunities, because opportunities are popping up all the time in terms of reading, because it's high on everybody's agenda.
I would highly recommend the OU website as a really good starting point for research. It talks about the different strands of reading for pleasure pedagogy, and there's lots of surveys and resources on there to help you strategically plan how you're going to shift your reading for pleasure culture. You can also find out more about the journey that we've talked about at Warren on there with our case study, which is a document that highlights our starting points, what we've done, and the impact of that across our school.
If you wanted to talk to Fern or myself more about our Reading for Pleasure journey, we love talking about Reading for Pleasure, so you can get in contact with us. You could contact the school office, or you can find us on social media. So we are Warren Primary Academy, and you can find us on both X and on Instagram. And then there's more information on our school website as well.
In terms of continuing to engage with some of the materials and resources that have been created, but also thinking about how to find some of the organisations that we've mentioned today and many, many more. if you can go to the Priority Literacy website, which is priorityliteracy.org.uk, that website that's been hosting lots and lots of information about the project throughout this the course of the last couple of years is going to stay online and be able to signpost you to lots of the different organisations that do brilliant work. The other place to look is the Flying High English Hub website, because they offer some amazing opportunities and courses around reading for pleasure, as well as author opportunities, author engagement events.